Welcome, I'm back after a month. This is the long awaited game 2. I'm gonna make a couple of changes going forward. Number one, 20 or so minutes is kind of a bit too long for a game review, so I'm gonna try to speed things up a bit more and just cut some details for the sake of speed. And second, I'm also gonna try to not sound like I'm empty inside. Okay, alright, without further ado, let's start. I'm playing black this time. As you can see, it's a gambit. It's not a solid gambit. As you can see, the computer doesn't like it that much, but I mean, it's playable. I'm not gonna delve much into the opening. I'm sure you can find many good introductory videos on the Benko elsewhere, so we'll just keep on going. And here, I'm just trying to play the usual Benko moves. So usually how it goes is something like that, where white just takes and takes, and then we get an attack on the queen side. But as you can see, the computer did not like that at all. I could have just taken and completely ignored the Benko aspect of the position and just played normally, which I probably should have done, but well, I really wanted to try the Benko in a professional setting, so that's why I was eager to try it out, because I'm pretty sure this is my first time playing a Benko in a classical game. So I just wanted to use my knowledge, not that I'm an expert in the Benko system or anything like that. I just know bits and pieces of it, honestly. Anyway, we continue onwards. And here I was hoping for something like Queen A4 because I have cooked up this idea right here. I've planned this all the way out. I was thinking Knight B4. We have a discovered attack. You do an intermezzo, Knight takes, Queen is still under attack, Queen moves away, and notice the pin. That's why the pawn can't take, so we have time to play something like C4, preparing a beautiful outpost for the knight. And the engine says that the only move is castles, which I guess makes sense because you don't want the knight to check the king, and plus 0.7 after that, which is it's alright. I mean, it's better than what we had here before, which is plus 1 for white. So I was really hoping for Queen A4, but that did not happen. So I still sort of tried to stick with the idea. So this is what I played. And Knight B4, again, same idea, basically. So that was my plan. And then Bishop came over here, and I thought maybe I'm gonna just take the Bishop instead. And I think probably the Knight is better placed here, blockading the pawn. And that was the right call. Knight D5 is plus 2, and Knight D3 is plus 3. So I'm glad I made the right call there. Anyway, rook there protecting the pawn, and I just went right for it. Terrible mistake. Don't know why, probably just because it's too weakening. And this was a really bad move for him because it's a bad pawn structure, and I was kind of happy to see that. And I started to actually equalize a bit here, and I was starting to feel fine despite the position being quite horrible a few moves ago. It all started because of this one move here that just really ruined sort of the harmony of white's position, I felt like. So I sort of just took this as a chance to strike, and I just tried to get an attack in. And I'm already feeling really good about this. We got a nice pawn chain here. We could build a battery, further push the pawns, except I sort of misplayed this and I played really terrible moves. I honestly can't tell you why. Probably I wasn't feeling too good after the first loss, so it all started with this move here. My idea was, let's just say, random move, bishop takes, takes, queen takes. I thought this was a fork and I could win the knight, but then just rook block, and then the rook defends the knight. so that was just a waste of a move. Thankfully, he got a bit cautious of that and moved his king out of the way. So he moved his king away. I decided to bring my king forward. Not the best idea. And then I I don't know. I mean, you can point and laugh at me. I deserve it. I have no idea what went on in my head with this move. Uh, let's just pretend that I did not make that move and that rook was on h8 since the very beginning. So this happened, and then just continued. I brought the rook back because I realized it was a mistake. And then finally, this move was played. And, well, it seems like a blunder at first because obviously you're just dropping a pawn and then this knight's also hanging in the end. So why would this guy make such an obvious mistake? Well, his idea is pawn takes, and queen takes, which is I just don't want to deal with that. And I saw this and then I thought, well, hang on a sec. I don't have to take the pawn. I just don't. I can just move away. And that's what I did. And I'm just fine here. This knight's under attack. He has to deal with it somehow. So he trades, and the knight's under attack, so the rook has to defend it. And I can take this pawn back because, you know, this rook is supervising the knight, so he can't capture back. I guess I do have to mention that when the guy made the move, this move here, when Jeff made the move, he had about 5 minutes left on the clock. I had maybe 10, maybe 15, I'm not sure. But probably that's why he overlooked the fact that I can just move my king away and just not play into his line. And it worked out for me. So king g6 to defend the pawn. Knight goes back, my knight comes forward, doubling the rooks, and then I tried to trade the rooks, except I made a terrible blunder here. I thought I could just play this intermezzo here and double the pawns. I thought that would result in a good endgame for me. So apparently this is a drawn endgame, which was quite surprising to me because I thought that I had a more active rook and we have doubled pawns on white side. So that was a bit surprising, and we'll explore the two different possible endgames here. So the other possibility is just the rook trade without the intermezzo, and this is a minus 2.7. So that's a very, very huge contrast there between the two. So let's explore this endgame first. So why is this good for black? Well, let's first notice that white cannot win the pawn here because of just checkmate. And also white has this guy over here to defend, which he can do by bringing the rook over. But we have h4 kicking the knight out. You don't want the trade because I can easily create a passed pawn here, and white can't really do anything about it. So one line that the computer gives is push, 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 rook check. If you go here, you lose a pawn, so you go here, and then push, take, take, and then white tries to promote, except we try to promote, and then king goes all the way up to defend the pawn, so that the rook, with just enough time, can swing back to f8 to stop the promotion, and all the king has to do is just keep advancing forward and you just win the game easily after that. So that's why you don't want to trade knights. You don't want this nasty passed pawn over here. So the only other option then is knight going back, and now rook just moves over here. And what you have to understand is that white's knight is a huge liability in this position because I have ideas like rook e1 and then knight d2. Of course, I can't do that right now because the rook is preventing that from happening, but this means that the rook is even more tied down. So, for example, white's rook is tied down to the b2 pawn, but white may think that's not really a problem. We can just play this move, trade pawns, and now my rook is free. It's no longer tied down to the b2 pawn. But as soon as you leave the first rank, you just allow this to happen. And you may say, that's fine, king just goes g1, but boom. I didn't mean to do that. And boom. Fork. And we just win the game. So that's just one example out of many for how white's knight can serve as a huge liability. So now if we look at the other possible endgame where I took away the knight, then this is obviously better for white now because white doesn't have that liability because I just took it away. For example, the rook now doesn't have to be passive and go to b1. The rook can be more active and go to c1, and we can have the same sort of pawn exchange idea, except I don't have rook b1 this time because it's kind of pointless if there's no knight on f1 like it was in the previous endgame. And also, these doubled pawns are not actually a weakness because they're really annoying. I can't sort of easily just push through with my king and pawns. So this follows exactly what happened in my game. I dropped the rook down to attack this pawn, but it's also a fork, and I'm also attacking this pawn. So he has to pick one to defend, and he chose the wrong pawn to defend, which just highlights the importance of the doubled pawn, right? So if you had saved the doubled pawn instead, and I would take this pawn over here, it's still a draw, which just highlights how powerful these doubled pawns are. And this was surprising to me because I initially intended for them to be a weakness rather than a strength. But I assumed that Jeff here had the same thoughts that I did, and also assumed that these doubled pawns were a weakness, so he chose to save this pawn instead of this pawn. He might be thinking, okay, you fix my doubled pawns if you take on g3, so I'll allow that. But it ended up being a huge mistake. And now the game just continued. So now that that doubled pawn is gone, you can see I can advance my pawns now, and this is also very dangerous because it creates a mate threat with rook a1 checkmate. So white is forced to send the rook back, and of course that leaves a5 unprotected, so I just take it, and this is just a really easy win. So that's it, that's the game. I guess the main lesson to be learned here from this game is to not always assume that doubled pawns are a weakness. That's a mistake that we both made in our game. So because I assumed that doubled pawns are a weakness, it cost me, you know, from going to a winning position here to a drawn position. And my opponent made the same mistake that I did. He thought that this was a weakness instead of a strength, so he didn't want to protect it. And it cost him going from a drawn position to a losing one. So anyways, I hope you were able to learn something from that. See you next time, I guess. Bye.